2026-2027 IDEA Part B. This year is a little bit interesting in that it has two different parts to it. Normally we have the primary and primary grants. This year it got broken up into the primary grants, and then there's this supplemental portion. The initial guidance that came out to us and the amounts that we got was just a singular allotment. It wasn't later until we got the GANs that we realized it was broken up into these two different grants, one for school age, and then for preschool, the primary and the supplemental. So in total, four different GANs. When everybody did their initial IDEA application this last month, the amounts that you saw and the amounts that you received were the amount is your total amount. It's just it wasn't broken out into these two different parts. Through some different follow-up and discussions with other states, and we found out that these are two different pots of money with different CFDAs and ALNs. And because of that, these do need to be separated out and tracked separately for your CFAs and just financial tracking with that. What this kind of means is that all the money that you budgeted for in your initial application is still accurate. It's just going to be broken out. And as of the July 1st, for everybody that has an approved initial application, you'll have ability to obligate and to use those funds and kind of the following breakdown. So for your school age, you're going to have 30% available. For your IDEA preschool, there'll be 100% available. And for both of the supplemental portions of the grant, there'll be 100% available. So again, these aren't additional funds. You're not getting a new pot of money compared to what you saw in your amounts that were sent out in May and in your initial application. It's just kind of being portioned out separately. So this morning I sent a email with reminder for this, but also there is a file attached to it, and that will give you a breakdown of the different grants. So you're going to have, the blue column is what you'll see should be a familiar number. This is what was in your initial application. This is what you saw and received in May. And then the two other columns is how those actually break out and how they'll need to be tracked separately. So the orange column will be your primary Part B allocation, and then the green column will be the supplemental portion. If you add those two together, you'll see that it's the same amount that you received in May and allocated for in your initial grant. There's a couple of different sheets in that worksheet and that file that just kind of reshuffles it around to kind of consolidate it to what your primary is and what your supplemental is, and then how it all breaks down. But you should be able to see all those numbers there. For accounting for this, the way we are planning to move forward with this is we're reactivating Fund 259. For those that have been around for a few years, Fund 259 should seem familiar. This was the fund used for the ARPA funds. In fact, we actually think that these supplemental funds are just the repurposed ARPA funds that weren't used the first go around. So get ready to dust that guy off and start using Fund 259 for the supplemental funds. Your primary funds for school age and preschool will still be tracked normally under your funds 257 and 258. Just these 259 will be for supplemental only. And that will include both your preschool and your school age. So we do recommend using separate project codes within Fund 259 to kind of keep those separate. I kind of just did a quick little example of something there, but really, for those expenditures, what we want to make sure is that, your school age is only using the school age function codes. Your preschool portion of the supplemental funds are only using the 522 preschool function code. The 616 can go either way, so that you don't have to be as careful with, but just making sure that you are able to distinguish between the two different supplemental funds. We're not going to create two separate fund numbers for each pot of those. Just use a project code would be the best practice. As well, just a reminder that for the IDEA Part B funds to continue using revenue code 445600. And then, yeah, the bottom's just a quick little snapshot of then how that kind of breaks down. So 257, 258 for your primary ones, and then 259 for both of the supplementals. For a few, about 21 based off the initial application districts, you're going to have private schools and your private school proportionate share. You should be familiar with these practices, but the same rules are going to apply to these supplemental funds. Um, these amounts will be reflected in your final IDE application, but they are going to be relatively pretty small amounts. The maximum based off the initial application data is going to be $330. The smallest is in, like the teens or something like that. So these are super small amounts that will possibly change. So we're not going to hand out those numbers yet because a lot of schools haven't done their affirmation of consultation with those private schools and updated those child counts with the private schools. So those are going to change probably. Um, and once you submit your final application, we'll be able to update those amounts into the tables. Now, with this, for those 21 schools that have private schools within their boundaries, you may have realized this last year that when you go into the GRA, there is a separate private school proportionate share um, section to do claims against and kind of keep those private school funds separate from your general Part B funds. We are not going to be doing that with the supplemental funds, again, due to the nature that these are relatively small pots of money to break out and have an entire separate claim for up to $330 of being the max amount right now. We thought would be a little extra effort than it was worth. So internally, you'll need to find a way to keep track of what the private school proportionate share is of those supplemental funds, and then making sure that when you're doing those claims, that those are being accounted for appropriately there. So that will be how the private school proportionate share will apply there. So with this, the supplemental funds itself are also quite small. The average amount is about $5,000. The median is only about $1,300. Um, so these will be broken out and have a separate tracking and claims process within the GRA. But again, they're pretty small, so we recommend doing this as first in, first out type funds. Use these up, get the claims submitted against them, so they can be done, accounted for, and you can move on and don't have to track them further once you get those spent. Um, For some LEAs, though, regardless, it's going to be a pretty small amount, mostly probably charter schools and some of the smaller, like elementary school districts. So we are offering the option if you think that creating a new fund and doing an additional claims process and things like that isn't even worth the amount that you would receive in the grant, to opt out of those funds. That table I sent this morning shows what those supplemental funds look like for everybody. So if you look at that amount and say, yeah, the accounting and just time and effort cost to manage for, under $100 is just not worth it. You can opt out. The way that we're going to collect that information and what we require or requesting from everybody really is to complete this survey. There's a link to it in the email this morning. There's a link to it here in the presentation. But if you could get that done within the next 2 weeks by August 12th, it basically is asking to acknowledge the new amounts for your Part B and your supplementals. And then under the supplementals, there's a option in a box to check if you'd like to just opt out of those funds. If you do choose to opt out of the funds, those will be returned and distributed with the final allocations in late October to the rest of the districts. So that just comes down to a choice for you guys, as is the time and effort worth the amount that the supplemental grant is giving you. And then with that said, the final application will be updated and there will be a new segment for the supplemental funds. You'll see your school age and preschool budgets, lowered a little bit to accommodate the supplemental funds, and then your new supplemental budgets that you'll need to um, complete. And then you'll probably need to update your school age and preschool as well for those lowered amounts. So just keep that in mind as you work into your final applications here. The final application is open now currently, but you won't be able to work really within the budget, or the budget numbers won't be accurate yet until we get these new allocation amounts uploaded into the application. But if you want to start working on things like the excess cost calculation, or for the private school stuff, or the other different segments of it, those are all fair game right now. So once those new amounts are uploaded and allocated into the application, though, we'll send out a follow-up email letting you know that it's been updated and those numbers are accurate. The final applications for the IDEA grants are still going to be required to be completed by November 15th. And that is all I really have to kind of go over this morning.